Look at you, taking a chance on a show that is in its final season. My name is Freddy Cruz, and this is Cruz Through HTX, the farewell tour. Not really a tour, so much as it's a love letter to my friends, my colleagues, the city that built me, the city that continues to build this. If you're listening, I'm pointing to my sweatshirt, which it has my logo, Speak Podcasting. And of course, it's a love letter to the animals who run all of our lives. Now today I'm not bringing on a guest. No guests, no. It's just you, me, and a story. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, no, just kidding. For real though, back in the day, several years ago, at the end of 2021 to be specific, I decided to leave radio. Nice corporate, cushy job, and pursue traditional employment, doing something related to the radio, whether it was copywriting, production, managing shows, being on TV, maybe even radio locally. I got turned down by two of my previous employers, crosstown competitors, so that was definitely off the table. I applied to every single TV station in the market, turned down. So, what does somebody who was rejected 450 plus times do? Starts his own business. But between the time that I left radio and the time that I decided to start my business, I had a podcast called Freddy's Huge Ask Podcast. It was heavy on the pun, less on the strategy, because really I wanted it to be something that gave me something to do, that I could treat like a job, which was the bi-weekly podcast, doing the research, reading the books, doing the prep, interviewing the guests, and then producing the episodes, chopping them up into short clips, etc., 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 etc. Between February and December of 2022, I had a whole whopping, drum roll, 800 something downloads, which was nothing when you compare that amount of listenership to the number of episodes I was putting out. And that's okay. That was okay. So what I did was I gave it another shot in the first half of 2023 just to see how things were going, how things would go. And it didn't pick up very much traction. I had really good guests too. I was so frustrated that it didn't pick up steam because I had guests like Jennifer Evans Welch. I've had guests like David Baldacci. I talked to former Navy SEAL / best-selling author Jack Carr twice, 3 times if you count an in-person event that was not in the podcast feed. Also, the youngest Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, Tova Friedman, world-famous entrepreneur Evan Carmichael. The names were big, yet the listenership was not quite there. So what I did, instead of shout at the universe, why are you not realizing my vision? I decided to hone in and focus on the city that built me, Houston. Cruz Through HTX. Kept the same promise, 2 episodes a week, and it did well until it didn't, until things went off the rails. Now, when you're operating a business as a 90-something% solo operator, things get off the rails every single day. And during that time, I was also working a part-time marketing job with a local area animal shelter. So it was like having 2 jobs and a lot of hours and a lot of dedication to each, and then also being a family person, and then being a pet owner and trying to not, blow everybody in my life off. And so what ended up happening was at the end of 2023, I had a series of no-shows and cancellations and postponements, and the schedule just kind of fell by the wayside, and I ended up having to rerun some episodes, and I had a big bank of episodes, so I could do that. It was cool because I could pull back on new episodes, replay older ones, and it eventually just caught up to me in operating the business and making sure that I was servicing people, because that to me was more important than my side project that I was so married to. I was so religious about the bi-weekly cadence that I was like, why don't I just shelf everything? Just pause it all and then relaunch with a seasonal arc. The first season, which was back in 2025, was health and wellness. It did okay. And what ended up happening was that after that season, I was starting to see a lot of really bad podcast advice from gurus on LinkedIn, from pod bros who really just are regurgitating old tropes from back in the day. And I knew that there was something that I could do about it instead of fighting in the comments and screaming at my computer. And that was the birth of Your Mic, my podcast about podcasting. And so I launched that show in October 2024, and I started having a lot of fun with it. But I also was having fun with Cruz Through HTX. And also, I was having fun with Your Mic because I was playing around with different formats. I got invited to my friend Brittany's conference. I was starting to get kind of, noticed by podcast industry people. And so I'm like, this is really starting to be fun for me. Like, way more fun than managing guest schedules with Cruz Through HTX. But I didn't want to just let the show pod fade. It's what we call when you just stop doing it and you don't let anybody know what you're doing. And so that is why you are here with me. You're listening to this episode, maybe you're watching on YouTube, and this is episode 1 of the final season. So I'm letting you know that this is a very deliberate season. I have decided to bring on some friends of mine, Powerhouse Pet Owners. These are people who run dog businesses. They're people that run iconic local businesses. They're writers. They're entrepreneurs, pastry chefs. I had a lot of fun. I curated a small guest list of friends who are going to be joining us that maybe you haven't read their work or seen their work or experienced their service or their business, but you will by the time the season is over. I promise you. We're going to wrap up the season with some of my favorite moments from the more than 125 episodes that we have that are going to live in the podcast universe as a vault, as a forever love letter to the city that made me, Freddy Cruz. So, that is the start of the final season of this podcast, and I appreciate you listening. If you are down for it, please consider sharing. And I would ask you to subscribe, but it really isn't going to do any good for anybody because the show is going to be over unless you want to get the notifications for the next 7 episodes of this 8-episode series finale, of which you are about to wrap up the first episode. I appreciate you listening to Cruz Through HTX.